Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining our breakout session. I am Laurie Brinkman, and I am on the business development side of Amend Consulting. We're a management consulting group, and I know that on the website our bios were listed. So I won't go into further ado, but I will say that I'm here with Jack Johnson today, who will be leading you through our slide presentation. Jack is the senior, one of the senior project leaders at Amend Consulting. Today we want to talk a little bit about data analytics, and which potentially could be a thought process that you've never really thought about before. Obviously, Stephen talked about technology and innovation. This is where we need you to start thinking about different ways to look at your business. So we talked, Jack and I have done this presentation before, prior to COVID. So it was a little bit easier to start off talking about data analytics and the whole part of thinking differently and incorporating change management into your mindset. But Jack, if you want to go to the next slide, we started talking about we have a Lego exercise that we created, and we take people through this process. We break the group up into 3 to 4 people, 2 to 3 people, 3 to 4 people, and we give them 6 2x4 Lego bricks, 6 2x4 Lego bricks, and we ask each cluster of groups to create and to configure those 6 Lego bricks and see what they come up with. After they do that exercise, then we ask them, how many different ways do you feel that you can configure 6 different 2x4 Lego bricks? And I don't know if anybody wants to participate by guessing. We would love to hear what your thought process was and is. Any guesses at all? All right, so everybody's thinking about it. I know I can feel it. Everybody's thinking about just exactly how many configurations can you create. So Jack, without further ado, we will share exactly how many.
So when this study was originally done, there were 102 million thought of ways to do it. But then once they did the same study decades later with algorithms and computers, they realized that there was actually 915 million ways to do it. And so, clearing that annotation off the screen, 915 million ways to configure 6 2x4 Lego bricks.
So, when Jack and I started putting this presentation together, we were talking about this, and it's an amazing figure. But it just makes you realize that when you get a group of people together and start talking about the different ways you can find out what an answer could be, or what that next thought is to put answers in front of you to make your business better. It is all about collaboration. It's all about discussion, because if you're siloed with 1 or 2 people thinking about what to do for the next step, you want to consider bringing more people in and discussing and having that open mind. So the next slide talks about data analytics and how data analytics can help you start thinking about different ways to look at your business. So data analytics, I'm not going to read this to you. Obviously, you can see what it says, but it's really pulling all the data together and all the info that you have at hand and creating valid reports to, again, make that department of yours at your company, or make the entire company run smoother and run more efficiently. We've realized that data analytics can be applied to any department in your company, whether it's human resources, and etc. I'll just say any department. So we're here just to talk a little bit and take you through that process of a new change and a new thought process of how to take your company to that next step. I know for me, when I think about change and I think about different ways of doing things after you've been, doing things the same way for so long, we all know that that's the easy way out, and I've done it this way all the time, and this is the outcome it's going to be. But in order to be competitive in today's market, to move forward with technology and innovation, you have to think about what that next innovative process looks like. And I know for me, when it comes to change, I get very, very anxious, and I really have to talk to myself and tell myself that, my gosh, this can potentially help my job in the long run. Obviously, it will take a little bit of time for a learning curve, but think about how you feel about change. Some people think about change as disruption, but disruption can be a very positive thing as well. Again, holding on tight to what you know, but then also thinking about how, with disruption, how that can improve your business, or specifically your department. Again, the last word I'm gonna say again is collaboration. Think about the groups that you work with, the teams that you work with at your company, and how many times you come out of that meeting room or a Zoom call or a GoToMeeting call in today's world with different ideas, and ideas that you might not have ever thought about. So again, open your mind when it comes to data analytics. Many of you might have already heard about data analytics, and what exactly does that mean? Jack is here to share with you exactly what data analytics can do for your company, and specifically, again, either your job or your department.
Thanks, Laurie. I think, this is a topic, like you said, that can go in so many different directions, and the Lego example kind of illustrates that. But I do know that we have a relatively small group on this breakout session. I think it would be really great to just understand a little bit more, where everybody works or what your role is at your company, and just give us a quick understanding of why you chose this breakout session, because we're going to talk about safety as an example in here. But given that we've got the benefit of having a small group, I think we can make this, an interactive breakout session as well. As much as, Laurie and I love to hear ourselves speak, we really want to make this an interactive session and get input and feedback from you so we can make it better, but so we can also provide something valuable that you can take away. One of the questions that we'll ask at the end of the presentation is, what are some of the key takeaways that you found from this presentation? So that being said, I can see everybody's names on the Zoom. If you don't mind just giving us a 10-second overview of who you are, what your role is, or what you do, and why you chose this session. So I'm just going to start quickly with Stephen Federley.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
If you were in the keynote presentation earlier, I described it in a lot more detail, but I'm director of engineering of a consulting engineering firm, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, technology, design for buildings. So anything that involves, based on that presentation, anything that I can move the forward with, leveraging data that we collect through our typical work and doing better in the future, I want to be a part of it.
Awesome. Appreciate you being here, Stephen. How about ABURG?
Yeah, Andy Bird with Messer Construction.
Hi, Andy.
I lead our construction technology and innovation team and are currently working on predictive analytics, specifically around safety.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Lisa Coruscant. Hopefully I said your last name correctly. Lisa, can you hear us?
Doesn't look like Lisa can hear us.
How about Chris Hopper? Maybe we'll jump back to her. Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. I'm Chris Hopper. I'm the Executive Vice President, General Manager for Skanska. We're a construction management firm here in Cincinnati, and we're digging in deeper into Power BI and trying to use as much data as we can for improving processes and that sort of thing.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. How about Michael Meyer?
Good morning. I'm Mike Meyer. I'm a litigation attorney at Taft, Stettinius & Hollister. I focus much of my practice on construction-related litigation. And I'm also the chair of the education committee here at ACI.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Jeff Smoker. Jeff, can you hear us?
Sorry, I was double muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, again.
So I am also with Skanska, Vice President of Pre-Construction, and we're putting a lot of effort into how we can leverage the data that we have nationally and globally about specifically cost data, how we can put it in a usable, sortable format that helps us to do a better job of predicting the cost of a project early on. So I spend a lot of time dealing with data and analytics right now.
Okay. Very applicable. Thank you for joining, Jeff. How about ARICCI, ARDI? Riccardi? A Riccardi, maybe? All right. We'll jump over to Brian Bozeman. Brian, can you hear us? How about B. Weissman? All right, I'll do one last call at A. Poltorak. Poltorak? Can you hear us?
Hey there, I got you. Yes.
All right.
This is Andrew Poltrak. I'm a litigation attorney at Stites and Harbison, and I'm curious about how data analytics plays into the construction industry, and we're also incorporating it into our litigation plans for developing cost-benefit analyses. So I'm just curious how that all works together.
Sounds good. Well, thanks. I know it takes up a little bit of time during the presentation, but I really appreciate everyone introducing themselves. I want to make this content as relevant to you as we can. So it sounds like we've got a lot of representation from construction management, construction litigation, some engineering. And so we'll talk about safety, but as it relates to your own company, if something that I'm talking about is ringing a bell, or it sparks a question in your own organization, like I said, I think we've got a small enough group this morning that we can jump into some Q&A and some interaction throughout the content. And it sounds like most of the people on the call are already pretty familiar with what data analytics is. So I won't spend too much time on this first section. I'll spend a little bit more time based on what it looks like for safety teams, how you can go about rolling it out, and then some real world examples. We'll spend the majority of the time there. If you do have a question, please feel free to go off of mute and just ask it. Again, since we have a small group, normally I would just say raise your hand in the Zoom settings, or just post a message on the chat. But if you want to just chime in, I think it's totally appropriate. Great, so let's jump right into it. Again, I won't spend too much time here, but we do like to give just a broad overview of what's the most simple way that we can think about what data analytics is overall. And for us, one of the easiest definitions is using technology and information to make better decisions. You can apply this into so many different facets, departments, metrics, but really the technology is the system, it's the hardware and the software, the nuts and bolts of your processes. And then it's all the information and data that's collected in those systems that we can use, and we can apply a variety of different tools to it to help make more informed decisions, or to help improve and strengthen the quality of those decisions. So that's all we're really here to do. And this is something that can apply to every company, every department, and it's one of the reasons that data analytics has become so popular over the last 10 years, is because the access and the cost of getting this technology has become so easy and so low, and so publicly available that everyone's doing it. And it's no surprise, based on how cost effective it is to do, that a lot of companies are adopting strategies, and they're creating new roles, and they're really embracing data analytics as a whole. What we like to talk about, and what we kind of see play out with a lot of the organizations we work with, is a number of different ways that you can apply data analytics. A couple people already mentioned predictive analytics, and how do we define what's going to happen before it actually does. These are 4 ways that almost every kind of data analytic can be grouped into one of these buckets. So the first one is business intelligence. I think someone mentioned that they've used Power BI. Business intelligence is very much of what's happened in the past, and it's uncovering the what. So what happened, just give us an overall output of, what happened, what is the data telling us. It's kind of like your classic reporting. It's a financial statement. It's telling us what happened in the past. And, it's very straightforward, very simple. People have been doing it for a long time. A lot of tools are making business intelligence easier to access, but it's backward looking. Descriptive analytics takes that business intelligence of what is happening, and it answers why it happened that way. So if you've ever looked at a dashboard or a report that was giving you reasons for the results, or factors that are driving results, or the rationale on why something happened, that's descriptive analytics. And there's a lot of data that can help you come to that why quicker. Where a lot of the market's going today is predictive and prescriptive analytics. So there's a slight difference between them. Predictive is telling you with a certain degree of probability how likely a certain scenario is to happen in the future. We're talking about safety and predictive analytics and safety. One easy application of that is, how likely are we to have an injury? And how likely are we to have an injury within a certain area of a shop floor, or within a certain job site or a project, or within a certain geography. There's ways that you can slice and dice that, but predictive is telling us what probability is an an outcome or a scenario likely to happen in the future. And that could be within the next 1 month. It could be within the next 12 months. It could be within the next 24 hours. It's what will happen with a certain degree of probability. And then prescriptive, which is the most advanced level of data analytics, is helping us understand the so what. So now that we are understanding that this is likely to happen, and we can predict that there's a 75% chance of something happening, what should we do about it? And so prescriptive usually takes a lot of the information that predicts an outcome, and it tells you how to change that information and turn it into the right way, for example. So, you know, I'll just use safety as another example of that. If we're trying to predict an injury, and one of the predictive variables in that equation is the number of overtime hours, and you note that certain employees have more overtime hours this week than usual, prescriptive data analytics will tell you to give these specific people more time off or to decrease the number of overtime hours they're working next week. And so prescriptive is telling you what to do about it. This is usually the most advanced because it's also the most difficult to understand what to do. But with data analytics and with access to all this information, it's becoming more and more accessible and you know, easy to figure out. And so you can see the power of all these different types of analytics that when applied to a certain business setting, it's helping people change the way that they work. It's changing processes to go from manual to automatic. And it's really helping us make better decisions. If we go back to the original slide, we're simply making better decisions more quickly and more easily. So let's talk about safety real quick. Safety construction industry is always, you know, a #1 topic, as it is in many industries. We do a lot of work with manufacturing companies as well. You know, if we think about data analytics from a safety perspective, really all that comes down to is how do we improve safety decisions? Again, using technology and information. So here are some of the key questions that we try to understand when measuring safety in data analytics. First question here is, what is our current safety performance? So you can measure that in a couple of different ways. You could, you know, measure recordable incident rate. You could measure, you know, the number of near misses. But that's a business intelligence metric, is what was our performance, right? The next point here is, how is our performance trending? Are we getting better or are we getting worse? Again, that's a business intelligence metric because it's telling you what's happening, not why it's happening, not what's going to happen in the future, not what to do about it. It's simply telling you what is happening today. And then some of these other questions get into more of the advanced data analytics. So how active are we in promoting a safety first culture? What variables could best predict injuries? How can we start to be more proactive about that? So that's where you start getting the more predictive and prescriptive analytics. And that's when you start to change the behavior of the safety team that's leading the organization or the individuals that are practicing safety habits on a daily basis. A couple questions down here at the bottom are also interesting. So how do we understand risk levels throughout a facility by location or by shift or by project? You know, most people could name a few things that seem like risky practices or things that generally you would want to avoid from a safety perspective. But have you ever measured those risks, and have you ever determined whether or not they actually correlate to outcomes? That's something that, you know, a lot of companies are starting to think about and track. Here's just an example of some of the information that safety teams generally track, as well as some very common safety metrics. I'm sure most of you are familiar with a lot of these, but just, you know, from everyone that's on the call right now, can anybody speak up and say whether or not these are things that you do track, or are there additional metrics that your company tracks that, you know, might not be as common? And it can be related to safety, or it could just be related to, you know, the role that you're playing today. And before you jump in, I'll give one example of that. I worked with a company, a manufacturing company in Cincinnati, that had a very specific metric that they tracked, and they called it their commitment to the customer. And it basically took a combination of 5 different inputs to come up with a custom value that they used to track whether or not they were serving their customers well or not. And it became a metric that, you know, the entire team started to rally around, and they started, you know, using that commitment to customer metric in addition to some of these more common ones. Are there any metrics like that that your companies use that everybody understands and that, you know, are easy to track and that, you know, get improved over time?
Yeah, so at Skanska, we track, we call them, you know, leading and lagging indicators. So obviously the lagging indicators would be an accident or a near miss. The key thing that we focus on is our leading indicators, which is doing crew reviews, making sure that everybody has their work plans in place, doing executive site safety visits. And what we've seen over time is, as those leading indicators, when they trend up, our lagging indicators trend down, and of course the opposite of that. So that's one of the key things that we focus on.
That's awesome. Yeah, we also did some work with an aluminum company down a little bit south of Cincinnati, and that was exactly what they started tracking as well. As they felt that they were really good at the lagging indicators and what's happened, the business intelligence, if you will. Where they wanted to improve most next was leading indicators, because obviously as your leading indicators improve, your lagging should follow. And data analytics can be used on both leading and lagging indicators. You know, not necessarily every type of data analytics, not every leading or lagging indicator can be put into one of these types of data analytics, but they both apply to all of them. Any other specific custom metrics that your companies use related to safety, or ones that you think are specific to your organization?
Similar to what Jeff was talking about, we also do 0 injury days track as probably be more of a lagging, but still track how many days we have without accidents.
Yep, that is a great example. A lot of companies track that as well. A great example of a piece of information that could be used to predict something down the road. Again, probably seems like common sense, but the greater that number gets, the more likely, or maybe the more likely you're not to have a certain outcome. You know, every day is a new day, but you might have information that shows that there is a relation between the number of days since an accident, the number of days since an injury, and a specific outcome. And that will vary depending on the organization, because every organization's culture is different. Cool. Any others? One of the metrics that our own company uses, it's not necessarily safety in the same sense that you might think of it, but we like to track the probability that an employee will burn out and essentially become too overloaded with work, which can be a safety metric in and of itself. And one of the things that we track is unused vacation days. And so we've started talking, you know, more this year about how, rather than setting a maximum on vacation days, is how we set a required minimum now, just to make sure that people are not overworking themselves. And it's one of those things that you wouldn't think to normally track, but there's, again, going back to the Lego example, there's so many different pieces of information that you can use to better inform your decisions and, make your team more effective. So along those same lines, nearly every organization has data. A couple of years ago, when all this, was growing, by a couple of years, I mean 5 to 10 years ago, when data analytics was growing and everyone was trying to learn more about it, one of the common excuses we used to hear was that we don't have any data, or our systems, we either don't know how to access it, or we don't know where it is, or we don't know if we have enough. In 2020, if your company does not have data in its systems, that would be something that's pretty alarming, in the sense that almost every company has this data. Whether or not you're used to looking at it or using it is a different question. But one of the things that we've seen is a lot of these existing systems, and it can be an ERP system, it could be an incident tracking system, it could be Excel spreadsheets, it could be on paper forms that are stored in file cabinets. There's a lot of information out there that can all be used to perform data analytics. Now, that being said, there might be some ways that you have to clean it or move it into a more usable format or a more accessible system to get it out and to really, utilize the data itself. But nearly every company today has data. I'm thoroughly confident in that statement. And the key question is, how do we get access to it, and how do we start to put it into a tool, many of which are very easily available? How do we put it into a tool to make it usable? New data is a topic that kind of initiates the creative part of the mind. So there's also a ton of different ways that we can start collecting new data if we don't collect it already today. Data warehousing is another trend that's becoming really popular today, and that's essentially the idea that we want to make access to data more easily available to other people throughout an organization. And so a lot of the things that we're seeing now is new ways of collecting data, whether it's through RFID or whether it's through scanners. It could be through a variety of different means. But then the next piece we're doing is, how do we understand how to make that accessible to everyone in the organization so that we can kind of decentralize the ability to perform data analytics throughout an organization? One thing worth noting is that when you are working together with a lot of different teams or different stakeholders to really perform data analytics, it does take time. It does not happen overnight. But what we've seen over the last few years is that it takes way less time than it used to. And so we kind of see a lot of organizations kind of roll out, new data analytics practices and behaviors in this kind of fashion. The first thing that they do is they explore it, they learn more, they discover what's possible, they start talking about ideas, and assuming they've got the resourcing and the people that are dedicated to making something happen, then they'll start building. And that phase one is where organizations will start to build either a report, they'll get access to the data, they'll connect systems together to get that data out. And then the majority of the involvement from the organization is when they are training other people on that information and getting people to adopt it. And what's probably happened in your own organization, if it hasn't, it will as soon as you start adopting data analytics, is one or two people might start to work on an application of data analytics. And as soon as they roll it out to the rest of the organization, everyone else sees it and wants something different. Or they want it updated or tweaked, or they want it applied, to their own role rather than to the person that built it. And so this adoption phase can take a long time, but it's not because the technology isn't ready. It's because everybody looks at the business differently, and everybody can kind of find something different in how they're going to apply data analytics. That's not uncommon, that's not a bad thing, but that's one of the reasons that we're seeing such an increase in the need to do data warehousing and make data easily accessible to everyone in the organization, is because when you're really adopting it, you're not just adopting a specific report or a dashboard or a metric that's getting tracked. What you're doing is you're starting to adopt a culture that's embracing digital tools and access to data. And so this training and adoption for one specific rollout might not be that long, but adoption of data as a whole as an organization and using it to make informed decisions can be a very long-term process. Additionally, data analytics does not replace processes and people. So with any successful project or undertaking that you have, you've got to have the people in place, you've got to have good processes, and you have to have systems and technology and and analytics to support that. So these are some of the things that are important to understand. You can't just forego them because you have implemented data analytics. How do safety SOPs change over time? So just because you start tracking something doesn't mean that it's going to get improved. Sometimes the first step is putting in an SOP before you can start tracking the information and make it reliable. How are new team members onboarded? Again, if your team members are not trained on what to track or how to provide an outcome, then the information or the data that you're looking at might be garbage. And so all of this is to say, it doesn't take the place of sustainability and onboarding and SOPs and process control. All of these are still strong requirements, but what they do is they enable good data analytics. So before I jump into some examples, does anyone have any questions on just how we apply it to safety and then what data analytics is overall? Okay. So here's a real example of a company that we worked with. They are a chemical manufacturer, and what they found was that they had a lot of disconnected forms of tracking information. They had incident tracking forms, they had hazardous material, they had a variety of different budgeting reports, and they had multiple different systems in which they tracked this information and used it. A lot of it was in Excel. We also noticed that they had a lot of siloed departments that were looking at information and using it in different ways, but that there was a need for other people in those departments to have access to that same information. And so what they did was they took all that information that they had and they converted it into tools that could more easily store the data on those forms. And so what you're looking at over here is an outline of a database. And then on the bottom here is a data center where cloud systems and online software will store their data in these massive data centers throughout the country. What they did is they made their data accessible to other people in the organization, and they started building reports and analytics to then understand what was actually happening and spread this information across the organization. And so in this example with safety, here's just one of the results of one of the applications of data analytics. What they started doing was they had always set a target for when they wanted incident forms to be completed. They always wanted them to be started within 48 hours of an incident actually taking place. And for the most part, in these blue areas, you can see that they never really had trouble getting the incident form started. But then in terms of actually getting it completed on time, which was usually about a 30-day process, they found that virtually never did they have these forms completed on time. And it wasn't because they didn't have the information. It was because, number one, there was not accountability to, there were no repercussions of not having it completed on time. there was no visibility as to whether or not they were getting completed. And there was not, there's a multiple different pieces of information to collect. Sometimes you're working with third parties and contractors to really pull all that information together, and without a sense of urgency or a real need to get it in, there was really no need to get it on time. And you can see here that 1%, less than 1%, and this is a couple hundred forms per year were getting completed on time. What they did in 2020 is they implemented a dashboard to track on-time completion of their incident forms. There were still no repercussions other than, having meetings to talk about how we need to improve. And, it was not tied to, bonuses or, incentives or anything like that. But they did start tracking it and talking about it and showing the results of it to the rest of the organization. And of course, you can see a huge increase in the on-time completion of those incidents once they started using data analytics to track it. Another example here is tracking management of change initiatives. So this is helping their team understand, what's the status of different projects, how many different tasks does each person have, and how many of them are open or overdue. Another application of this is looking at incoming safety requests. So, you can help balance workload and people. Here's another example of balancing people and workload. One of the applications that they're using on this report is looking at how many incoming requests they have and how much time or days it takes to complete those requests. And so they started tracking this metric. One of the things you can see here is there's a spike in August to September of 2019. What they did is they noticed that they started asking questions about why is it taking us longer to get these requests completed. What they found after having that new discussion is that they were having an unusual amount of internal team members asking this team to perform safety requests. And what the manager of that business unit did was then figure out how to reduce the number of internal requests so their teams could get back to their normal performance. And again, these are just examples of this one organization, but what they're working towards next is basically an ecosystem of data analytics and digital culture. And so you can see here in this screenshot, this is adopted from BASF, which is not the organization we're talking about. But what they're working towards is an organization that is leveraging technology and analytics throughout all parts of the value chain. And this includes a combination of connected systems. It includes taking analytics out of each of those systems and using it to make better decisions. Got one more example to walk through here, and I'll let Laurie kind of articulate it as it relates, to ACI. But I think, just another example of how you could potentially use analytics.
Thanks, Jack. So ACI is a host of a program called the Safety Council, which is a Bureau of Workers' Comp program that tracks injuries with the hours and employees. And the Safety Council has it's a program that the BWC hosts, and they ask twice a year for the safety reporting. And Jack and I were talking about how data analytics could apply to the safety reporting questions that the BWC needs, again, twice a year. The purpose of the Safety Council and the purpose of the safety reporting with the BWC, there's a rebate program that's attached to it. So it's imperative for the companies to report accuracy in their data. Many years ago, I was part of a Safety Council, and the companies were always struggling to obtain all of the information that is needed to fill out the safety report for the BWC. And so Jack and I started talking about how data analytics could could really aid these safety departments of all different types of companies. So with the use of data analytics, we can see what that 6-month process is when it comes to injury and then just the different components of this report. The data analytics could help so much when it comes to accuracy of all the data.
Thanks, Laurie. So I know it's about 9:58. Laurie, if you don't mind closing us out, and then we can jump into any additional Q&A.
Yes, so again, when it comes to that thought process, and it sounds like a few of you who we heard from earlier, it sounds like a few of you have taken data analytics and have at least started the process of utilizing it within your company. Where can that lead you? Think about all of the departments and how every department can benefit from data analytics. Again, the operations side, the business development side, the HR side. Think about how you can leverage data analytics within all of your different departments. I hope that this has helped you understand what data analytics is, first of all, but also what it could potentially bring to your company, and how with data analytics, how you can move forward in this COVID timeframe and afterwards. Many of our clients at the beginning of COVID, at the beginning of the quarantine, reached out to us to try to see what COVID can, what this whole quarantine and what this whole virus can mean to their company. We have worked hand in hand with so many companies trying to bring them through it, and also excelling afterwards. So we've had so much success helping companies. But again, data analytics is really the key with bringing all of that information to light, and to then understand how to apply that, and again, how to take it that step further.
So at this time, Mary, I don't know if you want to take over, but I think we could open it up for any last minute questions that the group has. I know we've got this time slot scheduled till 10 o'clock. Does anyone want to talk through any questions about the presentation, the content, or about something within your own organization that you're thinking through, a takeaway or a question from today?
Yeah, you can either put the questions in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask away. I'm not entirely sure when Jen is gonna bring us back to the main room, so.
This is Anthony at ACI. I was wondering if you can give us a little more color on if you are in fact doing any work with the Safety Council or BWC in terms of helping with accuracy. Is there any activity going on?
Well, Jack, if you don't mind, I can answer that. We actually presented for the ACI Safety Council back maybe in January or February. And we're in the process of talking to Columbus and the BWC in Columbus. They were going to push out that presentation because it's such a, I don't want to say new idea, but it's to many companies that are part of the Safety Council, it's a new way of thinking when it comes to safety. So the BWC out of Columbus had never seen this presentation before. So they were in the process of pushing that out to all of the Safety Councils in Ohio, and then COVID hit. So we are still in communication with the Safety Council and with the BWC. However, it's been put on hold right now. Just again, I don't even know how this if Safety Councils are even meeting at this point. Again, there's definitely conversation in the future, I know.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.